Who wouldn't like to have the chance to dine with a Roman emperor, taste the most expensive wine, the most extravagant food, and experience the most valuable entertainment that the imperial court would have prepared for its guests? But was it all gold as it could appear? Or were there other aspects we needed to consider before accepting a dinner invitation at the Imperial Palace on the Palatine Hill? I am Dr. Consuelo Martino from the University of Warwick, and I will talk to you about a few imperial dinners you would never forget. Let's start with the most famous emperor of all, Augustus. Before becoming the first emperor of Rome, Augustus organized a dinner for himself and his friends, during which they all dressed up as gods and goddesses. Augustus himself dressed as Apollo, the god of poetry and medicine. The secret dinner became famous as the Dinner of the 12 Gods, to stress how Augustus and his friends were disrespectful towards the deities. Augustus was attacked for it by his enemy, Mark Antony, but also by anonymous lines, not only because he played the role of Apollo, but also because apparently the gods became so offended that turned their faces from Rome and allowed the civil war and a terrible famine to continue. Fortunately for him, they did not stay angry very much, and things turned out well for the future master of Rome. He defeated his enemies and was proclaimed princeps in 27 BC. He did learn the lesson though, and never organized a similar banquet again. His successors too are very famous for how they used to enjoy parties. The biographer Suetonius tells us that Tiberius, for example, was so fond of wine that he received as a nickname Biberius caldius Mero. This nickname aimed to reflect the passion that Tiberius had for wine. If Biberius simply refers to the verb bibere, to drink, Mero, for example, comes from merus, an adjective to describe undiluted wine, while caldius, playing on the name Claudius, alludes to a hot drink called calidum, where wine and water were mixed. You could certainly count on Tiberius for some matching wine recommendations with your meal. Tiberius also was so fond of banqueting that he refused to interrupt one when he was ill and almost at the end of his life. With Caligula, his successor, however, the imperial banqueting started to become a little less joyful. The young emperor, claiming to follow the example of Augustus, used these convivial gatherings to seduce married women and mock their husbands, as well as threatening reprisals and executions. Actual executions took place at the banquets of these evil emperors, in fact. And things did not go better with another evil emperor, Nero, Caligula's nephew and Claudius's adopted son. The historian Tacitus narrates that during the celebration of the Saturnalia, a Roman festivity which occurred around Christmas time, Nero challenged his stepbrother Britannicus to sing in front of the guests of the party, hoping to make fun of him. Despite Nero's hopes, Britannicus, who was the biological son of Emperor Claudius, sang very well and alluded to Nero's usurpation of his power during his performance. Nero did not waste much time. He organized another feast and, with the help of a poisoner, killed Britannicus. Then, without further ado, he restarted the banquet under the astonished gaze of his guest. Being a guest at the imperial court could be a difficult task, but could also provide fascinating experiences. Nero and his henchman Tigellinus organized, for example, an exaggerated party on a raft on the Tiber. Emperor Vitellius was so famous for his passion about eating and drinking that he used to feast 4 times a day, and apparently welcomed back his brother with a banquet where he offered 2,000 fish and 7,000 birds. He was so insatiable that he also ate part of the sacrificial offers. But Vitellius was not the only one to enjoy good food. Domitian's banquets were so extravagant apparently that after his death, Juvenal wrote an entire satire on him and his council, debating after how to cook an enormous fish. And even if Juvenal uses it to attack the emperor and his court, the fish sounds tasty enough to believe it was a success. So, to conclude, imperial banquets could be as good as they were scary. Maybe a quiet meal at a local taberna would have resulted in a better evening. Unless, of course, Emperor Nero and his fellows showed up to liven up the place by making trouble.
Mitten alla solo